Welcome, Presley.
I'm Presley. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, I'm so nervous. Someone was talking about miracles, and it's a miracle that I'm standing here. I remember I just used to sit in the back on things like these and listen to the speakers and be like, just think you guys were lying, just phony. And I'm here speaking. If you would have told me 5 months ago that I was going to be here speaking and sharing strength and hope and experience, oh my gosh, I would have laughed in your face. So I guess I'll just start. So I always grew up not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I was just very lost and hopeless and just miserable. Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. I apologize. So I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't like anything. I literally did not even know what my birthday was. That's how much of a lost soul I was. And then I started drinking, and I liked the feeling of it. And that was the first time I knew something I liked and I enjoyed. It gave me this feeling of not so much hopelessness that I once had, and I just held on to it as long as I could, and it became my whole identity. I didn't know anything. All that I knew was I just liked to drink. After a while, that went on of me just going crazy, I guess, gunning and running. And I decided that I wanted to try something new. So I went to rehab, and I got out. And I remember I would just go to these NA and AA meetings, and I'd sit in the back. I did 90 meetings in 90 days, but I did not work the program whatsoever, and I was just miserable. So I just thought, if this is my whole life, there's no purpose. So I stayed a dry drunk for about, I'm going to say, a year and a half. I thought a guy would keep me sober. So to anyone in this crowd, no one else will keep you sober besides yourself. Learn from my experience. And then I just kept going, and I fell off. I wasn't completely on before. I did meetings. I didn't do anything else. I just sat in my room and went to meetings because I thought meetings were going to keep me sober. And of course, they didn't. So I went back out, and it was even miserable than before. I didn't pick up where I left off. I actually picked up way worse than that. I was completely back to being miserable once again, and I knew that feeling so well. It was just all I knew. And then I went in and out of rehabs because I thought rehabs were going to get me sober. This is funny. This is a funny story. I was hungover one time, and I couldn't get sober. I could not stay sober. And I got the Serenity prayer tatted on my arm, and they spelt it wrong. They spelt accept wrong. No wonder why it didn't get me sober. But I tried everything, literally everything except the 12 steps. And I just couldn't, because it's so funny. I just couldn't grasp the idea of turning my will and my life over to God, which was so funny because even before who was like I didn't believe in God, but if I needed to drink or get drunk, I sure believed in God. I did. He would be the first person I asked before I even went and got some. So, but I still didn't believe in God. So just seeing the steps, I've read them before, but I did not fully read them. And I was just like, no way am I going to turn I'm not unmanageable. Like, no. Like, I can be sober if I really want to. No. And then I went to rehab again. Yeah. What a shocker. And they were pushing the 12 steps onto me. Like, oh, you need to do this. Oh, you need to do that. And I was like, I just couldn't accept it once again. I was too stubborn. I was like, if I'm the only person that can keep me sober. And I was miserable, even more miserable than I was drunk. Like, I can be a sick sober too, not just a sick drunk. Like, it's a real thing. It was just, and then I met my sponsor. Shout out to Kels. She's amazing. And at first, I started talking to her just so I could get my phone back in rehab. Yes, I am guilty of that, and that's being humble. That was, and then she started, like, I thought she was preaching to me. I was just like, no, what she's saying is unbelievable, just no. And then I started actually praying to God, not like foxhole prayers. I started actually trying, and I was like, you know what? It can get better. I might as well just give life a shot. There's no reason why. I mean, alcohol is always going to be there, but my sanity, which I didn't have, wasn't always going to be there. So I decided to try and work the steps, and it started working. And I was like, what? What a shocker. And then, so I believed I was unmanageable. And then I read the second part. Sanity? God is going to restore me to sanity? No, I'll never be sane. I'm pretty sane now, still a little bit, working on it, but far from where I've been. I was really, I don't know where to go with this. Just unmanageable, left to my own devices. I really was. I don't know, I'm starting to get anxiety again. I had this whole speech on what I was about to say, and then I get up here, it doesn't work, and I completely forget what I'm going to say. But the steps definitely do work when you apply them. My whole life has changed because of it. It really has. I never just I always had this egotistic arrogance. I just made it seem like I always had myself and no one could ever do anything for me. And that's not true at all. I remember someone once told me when I was trying to get out of just trying to get away from God, I was like, how is God going to be able to do all this for me when there's other people asking him for stuff too? And it was like, this is what made me realize I was not God. Was somebody said to me, stop placing human limitations on God. He's not a human. And that really stuck with me because that made me realize I wasn't God, and there is someone greater than me, and he can help me out, that I don't need to do this all by myself, which was something I had locked in my brain, that I was going to do it all by myself, that I had this, that I know what not to do this time, and I know what to do. And of course, I didn't. And I'm here now speaking in front of you, even though I have anxiety. But so the steps do work, and if you turn your will over to God, he will help you out, and it's not just you in the end. That's all I got.
That was Presley's first time speaking, so let's give her another big hand. She did a good job. Let's welcome our next speaker, Michele.
Our very own. Thanks. I'm gonna set a little timer. I can watch my time. I'll watch you too. Hi, my name is Michele. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October 7th, 2022. I'm almost 3 years old. Thank you. I have a tremendous sponsor who's been with me since my first month at Decision Point, a rehab center, and I'm so thankful for her. And these days we meet about every 2 weeks, but she's a big part of my life. And this is my home group. I'm a treasurer. And it's been my home group since also the first month that I got out. So I remember I said, just kind of nonchalant, like, I need a home group. And Mike was like, you can be our coffee person. And I didn't realize, like, that's how it works. And I was coffee person. And I've had several jobs since then. So I will tell you my story, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. To be honest, most of my life is in what it was like, because I've only had about 3 years of sobriety. So, but I'll try to split up the time. Did anyone have a parent who was an alcoholic and you said you'd never do that? Anyone? Yeah, me too. That really affected me as a kid. You know, it was unpredictable, I feel like, mainly. Number one is like, oh, it's either too much love or, you know, who knows what else. And so that was not my first drug of choice. Something else was. But I believe that I was born an alcoholic and an addict. I've been obsessive about things my whole life. And I just didn't know that that was how I behaved. I was a habitual smoker for years and years, but I'll take any drug and use it till it's not fun anymore. And I've done that with several things on several occasions. So as a habitual smoker, my first drink, I remember, and that was fine, but I wasn't immediately an everyday drinker. That took a while to build. But one thing I can tell you is that I couldn't remain sober longer than a few days at a time for a long time. I was always using something or another. If I quit one thing, I was using another. I never was completely sober. And that didn't occur to me. You know, normally it would be like, oh gosh, like if I'm gonna stop drinking, well then what am I gonna use now? But it really didn't occur to me that that is my habit. And that's pretty, it's kind of sad. That isn't how normal people's brains work. They don't need something every day like that. Maybe it's like coffee, but coffee is a lot less damaging. And mine progressed, like a lot of people will say. So I did some things where I had to quit and go through hard quits. But with alcohol, since it was probably, you know, my main love in my life, it took a lot longer for me to quit that. And so I went from, I just always go out on a Friday night, always, for years and years, and a Saturday night, and maybe have some on Sunday. And then it went to more weekdays. And then in college, I was able to kind of, I'll do a little bit of this, but I'm still getting such good grades. My alcohol's not a problem. I'm getting good grades. Or I'm drinking, but I'm camping and I'm having fun with friends. I do things. I'm really, I'm outdoorsy. So there were all these justifications why it was okay for me to always drink. I drank so much that I became just a beer drinker for a while, because that way I can have something in my hand all day, right? So, and that was the goal, to be, I can hang, right? That's very important to me. I can hang. And I can drink all day long. But, it was a lot of beer. Float away. So what happened? Eventually, I was an everyday drinker. I was a manager at a grocery store, and I was drinking every day. I had people under me that trusted me, and I was an alcoholic. And when I woke up in the morning, I needed at least 2 beers to feel right. Had to have 2 beers. That was my first sign that this is getting out of hand. Now I'm drinking in the morning, and I don't feel good or normal until I have those 2 things. I can't possibly function without it. I wouldn't drink at work, right? And that was me being good, another justification. It's okay, but I don't drink at work. But right when I got off, I drank. Actually, I would leave and get on my bike and go to the liquor store and drink a little before I even biked home. I mean, it was an absolute need every single day. People started saying things to me that I would ignore. So people would say, do you think you can just quit one day? Or do you think you maybe had too much on that vacation? And again, I have a brain that will lie to me because I have an addiction. So I would say, I can justify this in some other way, until those got loud in my own head. Until I looked in the mirror and I said, wow, I haven't had a normal bowel movement in 6 months. That's not okay. That's not healthy, I peed my bed last night. That's not okay. That's not healthy. It's not what normal people do. This is getting sloppy. I'm not responsible. People are telling me things are wrong. And trauma had happened throughout my life. And that is another crutch too. It's just another justification to say, this is why I need it. Poor me. So I eventually tried quitting on my own. I used something called the Reframe app. But there's no accountability with that. So it would basically be online meetings with a bunch of people I don't know, and nobody got real there. So although I was trying to be sober for 6 months and using some other things, I eventually relapsed at a wedding, which I would know now that some weddings were triggers for me in the past. I do a lot better these days. But those are the kind of things in the beginning I had to stay away from, absolutely had to stay away from. And then I brought myself to rehab. It was my birthday week, and I really just wanted to give up. And it was the first time I'd felt that way in a long time. And I really meant it. I deserve to be gone. This is pathetic. I'm pathetic. Just all the thoughts. And actually, I looked at my dogs, and I was like, but you're their mom. What if you just stopped drinking? Took a long time to get there. So I took myself to rehab. It was suggested to me at the hospital. And I went home, and my husband drank. He's an alcoholic. And I went home, and I was like, if I stay here, I'm just going to keep doing this. So I went to rehab and detoxed there, and it was a rough few days. And then met my sponsor. I did outpatient. I did 90 and 90. I got a home group. And I really tried to work with my sponsor. Every week we met, we talked a lot, and I really tried to stay the course of just trying to do this. And I do believe that showing up is the most important thing for me. I have to make, I go to 2 meetings only right now. I hope that was more. But I have to make those meetings. It feels good to make those meetings. It keeps my head reminded. I'm an alcoholic. I need to be with my people where it is okay to be that way, and it's okay to keep working on my sobriety. So what's happened? You'd have to live my life to understand how the miracles have took place, but I went to school and I studied water, and I never had a job in water, and I'm a hydrologist now. I love my job, love it, and that, a little addicted to the work. But it's a little bit healthier of an addiction. My husband's sober. We're sober together. I'm close with family. I got my license. I just let my license run out. I was too afraid to go take the test and do all that stuff. And then I got sober and I went and did it. And I've just had success after success in my personal life. It is hard occasionally, and that's when the program, when you just one day at a time, today I could probably say, I'm gonna be sober the rest of my life. But there are many days I've said just today, one day at a time. Many days where that phrase just got me through that day. And it was so important. Those things you're gonna use them at some point. And you're gonna call on the people here, and it's gonna help. And then other days you're gonna feel super strong. So I just recommend, I do believe that you can get sober without Alcoholics Anonymous, but for me, I don't think that would work. And I need to be accountable. I need to be here to remind myself, and I need to have a safe place to talk about it, because even my husband, who's sober and not in a program, doesn't like to talk about his alcoholism. I kind of need that, so we do separate things there. So I do believe that it is a contributing fact for me also finding my higher power again. And that's the last thing I'll say is just asking God for help. In the beginning and today, every day, has been a huge change in my life. It also takes me kind of out of my head and think about, what would be the right thing to do? If I'm not hearing God's voice at this moment, right? And that's an internal kind of knowing voice. Then what would God say? So I guess I'll wrap up with that, and thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, Michele. So, our last speaker didn't show up. We do have a filler speaker. Can you guys guess who it might be? It's Mike Bennett. Welcome, Mike Bennett. Come on, hurry up, Mike. We got stuff to do. We got stuff to do.
Thank you. I should be. My name's Mike Bennett. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you very much for having me as the second or third choice. And welcome to everybody. It's nice to see so many people lately. I don't know how many treatment centers are starting to bring people in, but I'll tell you what, we've been here for, maybe 3 years. Craig would know. He was our first speaker when we moved to this facility. How long ago was it? 3 years ago? 4 years ago? Some time ago. And we kept thinking there were a lot of treatment centers bringing people in when we were at Safe Harbor. And then when we changed nights and moved here, it didn't fit their schedule, so they weren't coming. And now we're gradually seeing more and more treatment centers coming in. So I'm very pleased about that. And it's happy birthday to all the birthday people, especially you, young lady. And your sponsor showed up, I thought, because she liked me, but it turned out not at all. And I was thinking to myself as the birthdays were going along how important it is to have birthdays, because people who say time doesn't matter, stay away from those people because they're wrong. Time damn sure matters. But more important than the people who took the long-term chips is the people who are new with the 24 hours and 30 days and 60 and 90 and so on. And I remember before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not one of those people who instinctively knew something was off when I was young. Like I felt like I was from an alien planet and I just didn't belong here. What I was confused and I was scared. There was nothing about life that was easy for me. I was a scrawny little kid and I just felt like I was overpowered and overwhelmed all the time, and everything terrified me. And I used to act scared, and then I would get the shit kicked out of me by my dad or my brother, or if I was in school and I acted scared, the same thing would happen there. And after a while, I found out it was better to just take the whooping than to admit I was scared, because that was even worse. So I just started standing up for myself, and I started trying to act as if you didn't scare me anymore. And it never was true. I was always terrified. But more than anything, I was confused because I'd look at other people and they seemed to have confidence. And I could not figure out how they could have confidence when I could not. It baffled me. And I drank as long as I can remember. My mother, my biological mother, was a crazy person. She didn't mean to be a crazy person, and she didn't know she was a crazy person, but she was a crazy person. And she drank slow gin and 7-Up. And it's wonderful. And I don't know how old I was, but when I was a little kid, I remember, I can still taste it. I remember drinking that. And nothing magical happened. I was just a little kid. And it didn't change reality for me and my perception of reality and all that. All it did was just make me goofy and I'd fall asleep. But then a little bit later, my brother and I were out going through the neighborhood mowing grass, and this lady gave us $1 a piece for mowing her grass. And then she took a tall can of Schlitz malt liquor and she poured half of it in each glass and filled it with grape juice. And I just thought to myself as I was drinking it how terrible it tasted, and I thought, what a waste of not grape juice, but grape soda. I thought, what a waste of a good grape soda, because we didn't have any soda at my house, so I'd love to have a good grape soda. And so anyways, I just tried to act like it didn't bother me, and this kind of went on. And I never did, as long as I drank, I never did like the taste of alcohol. I mean, beer was okay, but whiskey and hard liquor, I couldn't stand the taste of it. But I kept finding these sweet liquors, and I finished up the last, 7-8 years I drank blackberry brandy. And I love blackberry brandy. I'll tell you what, there was nothing better to me than that. And I'd still drink it today, if it didn't cause so many problems. It turned out I was allergic to alcohol. When I would drink blackberry brandy, I'd break out in spots like Tijuana. One time I showed up in Durango, Colorado. Have no idea how I got there. And then I wound up back in Prescott. I have no idea how I got here. I just, I would just appear in these spots. Anyways, I didn't mind booze as long as it was, tempered with something sweet. But anyways, I'm going to guess somewhere around 11 or 12 years old, I took a drink and the fear was gone. And it was an amazing experience when that happened. It was the first time in my life that I ever was not afraid. And from that moment on, I always drank to change my perception of reality. And I heard a speaker say one time, and I identified immediately, and I've always felt this way. About halfway through my second drink, No matter what was going on in my life, good or bad, halfway through my second drink, everything would come together and it would be absolutely perfect. Now, it only lasted about 8 seconds. And then that physical craving set in where I couldn't stop. And then it would lead on to whatever it led on to. And for many years, I hear people say that they started drinking and they blacked out and got married and had a bunch of kids when they were 13, and that's the way their life went from then on. Well, it wasn't like that for me. There was a period of time that I could drink and stop if I needed to, even after it started changing my perception of reality. If it was important to stop and do something, I could manage that for some time. But in my early teens, that changed. I developed a reputation. People would say, don't give Bennett anything to drink or you're going to have to tie him to a chair to keep him from going to town. Because we lived out in the mountains by then, and that was true for me. And I remember one time somebody offered me a drink when I was out in the mountains, and there was a limited supply. I was 16 years old, and they offered us all a drink, and everybody said yes but me. They thought I was being a good boy, but the truth was I knew if I took a drink, it would be such a miserable feeling to try to just have one drink and then endure how that would feel without anything else to drink, that it was just easier to say no. But then I quit living out in the mountains, and the only reason was I couldn't drink out there. I started getting jobs in town and living in town because it got more and more necessary for me to drink. And by the time I was, 18, 19 years old, I was drinking every single day, and I can't remember a day I didn't drink. Well, there was a few times that I'd get in so much trouble drinking after a period of time that I'd start smoking weed, because it was the best. Think about this if you're planning a slip. Smoking weed was the best cure for drinking I ever found. It was wonderful, because if you're baked all the time, you don't need to drink. So I would do that if the heat was on. But then the problem would happen is after I smoked weed for too long, I'd get in trouble doing that, and they used to arrest you for that. They don't arrest you for it anymore, but when I was a kid, they'd arrest you for that, and I terrified to go in jail. So I would start drinking again, and then this went back and forth for me for several years, but I finally got to the point. I drank up a marriage and a child, and I was about halfway through drinking up the second marriage and that child, and I'd been through literally, by the time I was 26 years old, I'd been through 57 jobs. And I'm not talking about weekend project jobs. I'm talking about jobs with the W-2. And I know that because one day I was listening to a speaker in a meeting like this, and he said, he was like 30 when he got sober, and he said, I'd had 25 jobs. And I thought to myself, what a loser. And you may be thinking that now. But I got to work the next day, and I thought to myself, I wonder how many jobs I've had. So I took a legal pad out, and I wrote down, I'm working here, and I worked there before that, and I worked there before that, and I kept writing down and flipped the page, and I keep writing, and I flipped the page, and I keep writing, and eventually I thought, my God. So I numbered them, and it was 57, and I was probably 2 or 3 years after that before I admitted that to anybody, because I was really ashamed of that. Now I just think it's typical. It's not even a shock to me, because people like us were quitters, and I've known alcoholics who stayed on the same job forever, and they're very untrustworthy, so I would not spend time with them. But it's typical for people like us to quit, because when the heat's on, man, I'm out, I'm gone. And especially right before you catch on to it, because I was so afraid of looking bad. Right when I knew I couldn't hide it anymore, it was time to go, because I was not going to face the consequences. I promise you that. But anyways, I drank up everything I could drink up, and the last time I drank, I swore I quit, and I swore I'd never drink again as long as I lived. And 30 days later, I found myself drunk, and I didn't want to be drunk in the worst way. And that day, I don't know what happened, but something changed. And I told myself that maybe I should go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know anything about it, but I knew it existed. And so I called somebody I knew associated with Alcoholics Anonymous, and he came. It was almost like I had him on the phone, and I said, Lindsay, I'm having some trouble with my drinking, and I've been thinking about quitting. Now, this did not happen, but it seemed to me like as I'm talking to him, somebody knocked on the door, and I answered the door, and he was standing there while I was talking to him on the phone. Now, that didn't happen, but it felt like that. Like before I could even get off the conversation, this guy just appeared, because AA people are freaky like that, you know? They see an opportunity to attack and force their opinion on a newcomer, and I mean, they'll go to any length. And so this guy shows up at my house, and he starts yapping at me about recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous, and all I could hear was the Charlie Brown voices and his lips moving, and I was terrified. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with him, and so I tried to get him out of my house as quick as I could, and he left, and I thought, whew, God, I'm glad he's gone, you know. And then I was sitting on the porch, I was smoking, and I was having some coffee, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. You did a great job, by the way, girls. I mean, both of you. You did a good job. And so anyways, I thought, you know, I may need AA someday, but I don't need it now. So I had this picture in my mind that it's like an ace up my sleeve. I was going to just put it right there, and later when I really needed it, I would draw on that. And I made it 4 months without a drink, and I was stark raving sober. And finally, I didn't know what to do. And I knew drinking wasn't the problem. People told me my whole life that if I quit drinking, my life would get better. And here was proof one more time that they were wrong. I'd been sober 4 months, and I was more miserable than I had ever been in my life. So drinking was not the problem. I know it must look like that, but you people are wrong. Drinking was my solution, and now that I don't have it anymore, there's no solution for living life like this. I just couldn't handle it. My emotions had become so unbearable that I didn't know what I was going to do. But I went to AA anyways because I didn't know what else to do. I would have went to treatment, and I was jealous of people who went to treatment for a long time after I got sober, because I thought, why didn't I get to go to treatment, sir? Well, when you go to 57 jobs, you don't earn any health insurance, so that's why you can't go. And obviously you don't save any money, so I didn't have any money. I didn't have any insurance, so I couldn't go to treatment center. And I thought about getting like one of those county appointed like therapists or counselors, and I thought, well, hell, if they were any good, they'd be psychiatrists or something, you know, so I didn't want to go to them. They're losers. So anyways, I just looked in the phone book, and I called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to an AA meeting. And I remember I was on the phone, and I'm writing down where the meeting is, and I turned around, and my ex-wife now, but my wife was standing there, and she was looking at me, and she had this puzzled look on her face, and I said, what? And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to go to an AA meeting. And she said, why? Nobody understood that because I was sober for 4 months, and I understood it less than they did. So I said what you say. I said, shut up, in my mind. And I left, and I told her the truth is, I said, I don't know why. I don't have an answer. And I got in the car, and I went to an AA meeting. And I was really lucky that I found a good AA, because I went to a meeting, and I didn't have any idea what you guys did, but I heard one guy say, if your problem's drinking, stop drinking and your life should get better. But if you stop drinking and your life gets worse, maybe we can help you. And that was the first time I thought anybody might understand how I feel. And after the meeting, I left, and he chased me out to my car. And he stopped me and he said, hey, do you have a sponsor? And I didn't even know what a sponsor was, which many of you who are new may not really understand it. I didn't know what it was. And I said no. And he said, well, I'm going to be your sponsor. But he said, there's some things you're going to have to do. And he seemed like a guy that might understand what's going on. So I decided to listen to him, and I agreed to do what he told me to do. Then he said, can you follow directions? And I lied and said, yes. He said, I want you to call me every day, and I want you to start. He said, do you have a big book? And it turned out I happened to have a big book. A cousin of mine had given me one years before, and I don't know why, but all the cars I wrecked and sold and lost and ran through, that big book seemed to make it under the seat of every new car. It just kept following me along. And so when I went to AA, I had this book that I'd never opened the cover on, and he said, I want you to start reading that book and call me every day. And he told me when my home group meetings were and that I was to attend those meetings. And so I just started doing what he said. And then he said that fateful thing. He said, do you believe in God? And I said, no, and if I have to for this to work for me, it won't work for me. And he said, are you willing to believe in God if I can prove it to you? And I said, well, yeah, but you won't. And he said, that's good enough. And that's why I think he was one of the greatest days in the world. People will tell you, you have to believe in God for this to work, and I am proof that you do not. Because if I'd have had to believe in God for this to work for me, I would be dead. It couldn't have worked for me. But what he did was he left me alone about that, and he started helping me take practical actions that are laid out in the steps. He said, do you think I'm doing better than you? And I said, yes. He said, congratulations, I'm your higher power. And I was happy with that. Because here was somebody that I thought might understand who was willing to help, and I just got the 2-minute sign, which it's 8 o'clock. Would you get on the ball? You should have given me that 2 minutes ago. And so anyways, he said, if I could prove it to you, won't believe? And I said, yes. And he did, with your help. And I really appreciate you for that, because now I live a life that is, I feel bad for you guys not having my life. I mean that sincerely. If you're new and you're feeling low self-esteem and all of that, I want you to know that I like me so much that if you don't, I feel bad for you. And you can have that too if you stay sober. Thank you.